Good evening or good morning wherever you are in the world. I'm Regina Yao, founder and president of the Pixel Project, and I'm moderating the 11th Google Hangout session of the 6th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. So through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 17 award-winning best-selling women writers to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. And also to help us reveal the first mystery celebrity male role model portrait in our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. So we'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later. And you can find out more about the Pixel Project and what you can do to stop violence against women by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. Now, we have a very special guest today. We're having a live discussion and Q&A session with the fabulous Kennedy Ryan. Ms. Ryan is a Rita Award winner and a top 25 Amazon bestseller who writes about women from all walks of life, empowering them and placing them firmly in the center of each story and in charge of their own destinies. Her heroes respect, cherish, and lose their minds for the women who capture their hearts, and she has always leveraged her journalism background to write for nonprofit organizations, but enjoys writing to raise autism awareness the most. Kennedy's writings have appeared in Modern Mom magazine, Frolic Chicken Soup for the Soul, USA Today, and many others. She's also the founder and executive director of a foundation serving Atlanta autism families. And she has appeared on several media outlets as an advocate for families living with autism. Welcome, Kennedy.
Hi, thank you for having me, Regina.
This is so awesome to have you today with us. And you have also generously donated a wonderful long shot goodie bundle to the stash of author treats we have up for perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. And okay, so let me get this straight. So in that bundle, you have one signed and personalized special edition of long shot that is unavailable anywhere else.
That's correct.
You have one Kennedy Ryan water bottle to keep y'all hydrated.
Yes.
Hydrate. Yeah, and a book bowl to keep your book nice and safe. And you have one Kingmaker card, which is gorgeous with a gorgeous photography art. You have one pen and notebook as well, so y'all can write whatever your thoughts are in this time of everyone being on quarantine. And you have one Kennedy Ryan makeup bag for the reader to stash your favorite makeup on the go. And we have raised $5,930 so far. That means we've shot past our initial fundraising goal, and we are now aiming to reach our $10,000 stretch goal.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, so because last year, as I mentioned to you before we came on air, we had a funding shortfall. So this year we are working extra hard to make up for it. So everyone, please give generously. All funds go towards our work to end violence against women, including this program, which Kennedy is on. It's called Read for Pixels, where we talk to authors about violence against women in books and pop culture and in real life. And if you are watching the session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Kennedy questions live. Now, just make sure you're logged into YouTube so you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the screen. And Xiaoqin, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Kennedy to answer. And now, over to Kennedy to do her reading. Now, Kennedy is going to read from Long Shot. And this is just a quick trigger warning for any of you who are a domestic violence survivor, because this might be slightly disturbing for you, but it's not very, just rest assured that it's not very explicit. But we just wanted to make sure that if you feel like you would like to walk away and get yourself a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom or get some tea or cookies or whatever, just come back in 5 to 10 minutes time. In about 10 minutes time, and the discussion session and Q&A session will begin. So over to Kennedy. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course, thank you. I'm going to read an excerpt from Longshot. I want to assure anyone who's watching who wants to read, there's no abuse that happens in this excerpt that I'm about to read. It is actually a very healing excerpt, and it's one of my favorites. So I will start right now. Mimi says she was tutored by the bayou, by the Mississippi itself. She says that a river is the blood meandering through Louisiana's veins, and it casts a spell on all who love it. I don't know that I ever loved Louisiana. I never knew this Louisiana. I lived in the 9th, on the bayou. A thick carpet of green grass squishes between my bare toes. In the city, there was concrete under my feet, cracked and unforgiving. An arch of cypress trees shelters the path from Mimi's small house down to the river. But in my neighborhood, growing up, power lines crisscross the sky like electric spaghetti. No, I didn't love the lower 9th, but I think I'm falling for the bayou. There are so many differences between the city and St. Martin. Being here the last year, I understand why Lotus saw living with our great-grandmother as a blessing. How she must have laughed when I claimed to know Mimi as well as she does. What a ridiculous notion. When we showed up on her modest doorstep, I barely recognized her. I don't know exactly how old she is, but traces of great beauty still remain on her face, even past 90 years old. She has fewer wrinkles than she should, her skin carrying the patina of age, shine to a high polish. And her eyes, those eyes can see your soul in the dark. Lo hadn't told her much about my circumstances except that I needed to come home. But when I stood on the front porch and the blue door to Mimi's greenhouse swung open, her eyes probed mine in the dim porch light. That omniscient gaze sliced through the humid, heavy air, narrowing and softening with every new thing she read in my soul and dug out of my heart. Her thin arms drew me close, and she whispered to me in French. I didn't understand what she said. I didn't need to. The power of her voice, the life in her words, winnowed to the bottomless pit where I hid my hurt. Before I knew it, my pain and disillusionment, my disappointment and regret poured out of me into the silver braid hanging over her shoulder. Mama? Sarai's sweet voice startles me and forces me to turn away from the bayou. She's learning more words every day, half of them French because people speak that here more than anything else, and the rest of them English because that's all I know to teach her. Hi, princess. I bend and scoop her up. Did you walk down here by yourself? She nods, bobbing the pigtails I scooped her dark hair into. Eat. She clumps her fingertips together and presses them to her lips, making the sign. Time to eat? I ask, waiting for another nod. What's Mimi got for dinner? Want to find out? The patch for Mimi's to the river's edge is short, safe, and well-worn. This arch of trees provides the coolest spot for miles, and I find myself down here every chance I get. In the summer, humidity is the sultry breath of the South. I've given up on taming my hair since the moist air coaxes it into tight coils that hang down my back and around my shoulders. There's a freedom to it. Caleb liked my hair straight. He wanted everything a certain way, wanted me a certain way. With distance and time, I realized I probably initially gave in to many of his preferences to make up for the fact that I didn't love him. Didn't, couldn't, I'm not sure I ever did. If I hadn't gotten pregnant, Caleb probably would have been that guy I dated in college who ended up in the NBA. Maybe we would have had a long distance relationship for a little while that eventually ran out of steam and followed a path to a natural end. But I did get pregnant, and everything changed. I barely recognize the woman I've become, so different from that girl, fresh from college, driven to achieve whatever she set her mind to. Affamé? Mimi asks, lifting the top from a pot on the stove and smiling through a cloud of steam. Yes, starving. I grabbed 3 plates from the hutch against the wall, silverware, and 3 of the linen napkins Mimi still eats with each night. At 2 years old, Sarai can barely reach the table, but she strains up on her little toes to set the forks down by each plate. She's mature for her age, bright, observant, and so beautiful. Etouffee, she says when we sit down to eat, her smile pegged with baby teeth. Grits, I correct gently. I raise my spoon to taste and close my eyes to savor. And shrimp, so good, Mimi. Mine never turns out this good. She has taken up my culinary education, which my mother never really bothered to do. We eat in relative silence for the first few moments, but that won't last. At Mimi's age, her mind still races with questions, and her curiosity makes for lively conversation. You like Jerome, eh? Mimi's silver brows lift and fall suggestively over mischievous eyes. He likes you so much. He may start delivering the mail on Sunday soon. Oh my God. My cheeks flush with embarrassment, and not from the heat in the non-air conditioned house. He's our mailman, Mimi, so I like him fine as far as mail goes, but nothing else. I attempt a stern tone, but my lips twitch at the corners, and so do hers. You are beautiful, young. Mimi narrows one eye at me before taking a bite. You have needs. I have needs? I cock a dubious brow. So Jerome, the only man I see on a consistent basis, qualifies to meet these supposed needs of mine because he delivers our mail on time? There's nothing like Mimi's laugh. It starts as a cackle, then swells to a guffaw, the sound booming from her small body and floating through the air like bubbles that settle around you and pop with energy. It's the kind of laugh that invites you to join in. Besides, I say when our laughter fades and we turn our attention back to dinner, I don't know if I do have those needs. I'm satisfied with a good meal and my princess. I lean over to kiss Sarai's silky mop of curls. You buried your needs with your pain, Mimi says, her voice sobering and her eyes probing, but they're still there. Are they? My index finger makes a circuit around the porcelain rim of my bowl. Maybe once, but I shrug and hope she'll leave it alone. I have aches and scars from my life with Caleb, some visible and some hidden from the naked eye. This body kept all my secrets. My shame took sanctuary in its crevices and cracks. I'm not sure this body's capable of pleasure anymore. Tell me, she persists, your boyfriend, he hurt you, yes? The scorching summer's day and boiling soup in the kitchen make the air like a wool blanket around my shoulders, hot and heavy, but I still shiver. Caleb is far away and has never so much as sent a text to the prepaid phone only Lo knows about. He doesn't have my number, and I don't think he knows to search here, but I find myself on alert. Some people are afraid a gator will crawl out of the swamp and emerge as a threat. My nightmares star a different predator. I dream Caleb will rise out of the bayou someday and eat me whole, and next time I won't be able to pry his jaws open and escape. He took from you. Mimi says it like she knows for sure. She probably does. He took, and you think you'll never want a man again. I glance self-consciously at Sarai, but she is too young and oblivious, chewing on crusty bread with her little teeth and eating the grapes I put on her plate. There was a man I wanted once, but if he knew all that had happened to me, God, the thought of August finding out about Caleb and all that he did, I touched my neck. The idea of wanting a man again is hard to swallow when I still feel Caleb's hand at my throat. Only it's not his hand cutting off my breath, choking me. It's shame. My spoon drops, clattering in the bowl. I'm shaken by my memories, so visceral that after a year, I still feel Caleb shoving inside me like a battering ram. The sting of his belt buckle biting into my hip is still fresh. Yesterday's regrets make today's sorrows. You'll want again. Mimi covers my hand with her weathered one, the ringed fingers squeezing mine. You need to be cleansed. She's right. I'm dirty. How could I not be after that animal was inside me, after he subdued me like a rabbit he only left alive for sport? Even so, I don't put much stock into the rituals Mimi thinks will make a difference. Meet me in the back after her bath. She nods to Sarai, whose long, drowsy blink sends shadows on her cheeks. After bath with bubbles in Mimi's clawfoot tub, Sarai insists on a story. She loves fairy tales, and I don't have the heart to tell her that sometimes Prince Charming turns out to be an abusive asshole like her father, and sometimes his kisses bust your lips. When her lashes flicker and her breath slows into sleep, I turn off the lights in the small bedroom we share. Funny, we lived in a mansion and every day I felt caged, claustrophobic. Now we live in a 4-room house out in the middle of nowhere. We share a bedroom whose walls I can practically touch with each hand when I spread my arms, yet the sense of freedom is like none I've ever known. I push back the curtain, studying Mimi's back room with interest. I've seen people enter distraught and leave clutching their newfound peace and a mason jar or bottle of something from Mimi's shelf of solutions. I don't understand all that Mimi does. The potions people from town come to buy, the rituals she performs in the back of the house behind a curtain. I don't know all that she does, but I believe every word she says. She lights the last in a line of candles on a table against the wall, glancing up to find me paused on the threshold. Come, she says. Even her voice is different here, brusque but not stern, soft yet impersonal, gentle and firm. She has work to do. Work on me that I'm not sure I'm ready for. Once I climb on the table, I don't know what will come next. Delaying, I browse the bottles crammed into shelves lining the wall, a restless, tactile exploration with my fingertips. I hesitate over a bottle with an unfamiliar symbol. Don't touch that one, Mimi says with her back turned to me. How did she? I've stopped asking questions. There's an omniscience to my great-grandmother. Some days, when her shoulders droop and her bustling steps slow to a shuffle, I wonder if she's tired of knowing all the things she learned. If maybe soon she'll weary of living in a world that no longer holds mystery and set off for a new adventure. She's bent, looking for something under the table. Still nervous, I ease open a drawer, surprised to find a pocket knife. The handle is curved and ornate. It's delicate, designed for smaller hands. I pick it up, caressing the jeweled button that opens it. I press, and with a snap, it unfurls a sharp, wicked length of blade. Touch a lady's knife, Mimi says, some humor sprinkled in her words. You better be prepared to use it. I glance up, then catch the slight smile on her lips and return it. The simple connection spreads warmth over me as effectively as a physical embrace. Mimi communicates more with fewer words than anyone I've ever known. It feels like we learn as much about each other in glances, touches, and smiles as we do with the things we say. I was surprised to find it, I admit, replacing the knife and closing the drawer. Well, a woman in this world has to keep her wits about her and her weapons at hand. Mimi measures me from head to toe with a glance. She gestures for me to climb on the table. My nerves stretch so tight, I'm sure I'll tear in half. You must breathe, Mimi whispers. Her words float above me, shrouded in the candle's aromatic smoke. Below, my body's held by a cloud of pillows. I should feel safe, secure, settled, yet I feel exposed. I'm so vulnerable, I close my eyes and cover my heart with my hands. Hands down, Mimi commands gently. Lowering my hands, I lock eyes with my great-grandmother and draw in deep, scented breaths. Breathe out. Her eyes never leave mine as the breath pushes past my lips, and the longer she looks into my soul, the sadder her gaze becomes, shimmering with tears. Oh, ma petite. Can she see? See past the fragile facade I've erected to cover the ruins? Can she see that last night and all the nights before, how he ravaged me? Does she know that I feel plundered like a picked over battlefield littered with dead bodies? That some days I am dead and that Sarai taking care of her is the only thing forcing me through the motions of life? When Mimi looks in my eyes, does she see? Her hands pass through the air above, covering me in scented breezes. Her words migrate from Spain, from France, and West Africa, all the places that made us and mix in our blood and our heritage. The syllables fall from her lips, foreign and familiar, as tossed and varied as the gumbo she taught me to prepare. Breathe out the lies, she said, that it was your fault, that you failed, that you are what he said you were. When her words sink in, when they drill down to my core, a sob explodes, detonating through my belly and chest and blasting open a wall of deceit I didn't know was there. Tears leak from the corners of my eyes, and I'm so damn tired of tasting my tears. The image of Caleb pressing his thumb into my mouth that first night, soaked with my tears, flashes through my mind. The night his wicked trap caught me. Breathe in truth. Her hands are busy in the air over me, slicing through lies. You are pure. You are enough. You are strong. She leans closer, her whisper as sharp and fierce as the knife in her drawer. He can't hurt you. My shoulders shake and my head tips back, emotion stretching me wide, arching my back, elongating my neck and wrenching my mouth open in a wail, a warrior cry. And in a smoky room filled with shadows, those parts of me Caleb scattered, I reconvene. All the pieces he splintered, I mend. And everything he stole from me like a petty thief, those things, every single one of them, I repossess. Yes, Mimi's affirmation infuses it with power, strength, dignity, courage. All these things belong to you. Take them back. Your soul is yours. Your heart is yours. Your body is yours. Yours to keep and yours to share. Yours to keep and yours to share. The words summon a memory I haven't allowed myself in months. Breathing in and out, I indulge in thoughts of August. His carved profile and soft full lips, his thundercloud eyes and gentle hands, a body of granite covered in taut velvet skin, the urgent want smoldering between us, his hunger so palpable, I felt it stroking me everywhere, his tongue delving inside, seeking, giving. A gasp transports me. And my eyes drop closed until we are alone again, he and I. Back in that closet, the door shut, sealed off from the world. Our mouths meld and our breaths tangle. And I can't gather enough of him on my tongue, can't reach enough of his body. I press into him until our bones touch, until our souls kiss, until every part of me from the inside out I've shared with him. And I break. I break like a storm on the Mississippi River, a relief from the cloying weight of summer heat. I'm a deluge, drowning my doubts and washing away my fears. I stiffen with a catharsis so spiritual and sensual, so pure and carnal, that for a moment, I'm not of this world. I'm above its cares, outside of its confines, divorced from my body and untethered from the earth. Breathe in, Mimi says softly. Breathe out.
Phew! That was awesome. I'm gonna say now that reading Long Shot was difficult for me because I've been working for over a decade in the anti-violence against women movement, and everything that you have.
Writing it was very difficult.
Yeah, and everything you've written is like, oh, she got it. Oh my God, she got it. She got it. Spot on. And then I'm like, okay, I need to stop now. Otherwise, I'll ugly cry.
Yeah.
So
it's, I've written, a lot, not a lot of books, but of all my books that I've written, Long Shot has that effect on a lot of readers. I got a lot of messages saying I had to stop and then start again later. I had to take breaks. I got a lot of messages. You know how you have the watch, the Apple Watch or whatever that tells you you're not breathing. A lot of readers would say my watch alerted me, breathe, because it is definitely, I think some of the feedback I get is that it feels like real life. A lot is that it sometimes it doesn't feel like fiction. It feels like it's actually happening. And I know it is very visceral. It's very real. It's very raw. It was a difficult book for me to write. I tell people, some people don't believe me, but after writing Long Shot, I literally had a bald spot in the back of my head because I was pulling my hair so much. It was such an intense, it was the most intense writing experience I've ever had. So I do recognize that it's difficult for a lot of people. It's the only book I have that has a content warning, like a trigger warning. And I've even strengthened that as we've gone along because I realize it's a very visceral experience for readers. And so I want them to take care of themselves. Yeah.
So before we start the first question of the discussion session, we have a question from the audience, which is really relevant. Hi, Kennedy. This is from Kay Owsley. Hi, Kennedy. Thanks for writing this story. I've read it twice, and parts of it are still jarring to me. Yeah. Do you continue to keep in touch with the women that you interviewed?
Yes, I absolutely do. Well, there were a lot of women that I interviewed. So I talk about this. My background, my degree is journalism, and a lot of what I wrote in another life when I was doing a lot of freelance work was interviews, you know, and so that is such a huge part of my writing and creative process. So over the course of a book, especially a book as intense as Long Shot, I interviewed more people for Long Shot than any book I've ever written. So there were a lot of survivors that I interviewed. I interviewed survivors. I interviewed social workers. I interviewed shelter workers. As I was writing Long Shot, a lot of them, but there were two women who I dedicate the book to, actually, and they became my sensitivity readers. Some people call them accuracy readers, authenticity readers, but those two women are actually, they're readers of mine, like regular readers, like they're in, you know, my reader group. And it's so interesting because I got to meet one of them at Book Bonanza, which is a huge signing, like a book signing. And when we met, like in real life for the first time, we just cried and cried and cried. It had been a book. I had actually, Long Shot had won the Rita. So it was like this last summer. It had been out for over a year. So, but we had never gotten to meet face to face, and we just wept because it felt like their book. They guided me, especially these two women, because I interviewed a lot of people, but there were two women who were survivors who literally read the entire book in every phase, gave me feedback, helped me to edit things, either to make them more visceral or to pull them back. Like if they felt like this is too much, then they would, you know, they would give me that feedback. I owe them an incredible debt of gratitude. So yes, I still stay in touch specifically with those two survivors who were my sensitivity readers. The other women, the other people I interviewed, I didn't have as much of a relationship with. It was like contacting a shelter worker and then just conducting an interview. But the two, you know, that kind of thing, and also with survivors. But those two women who were my sensitivity readers, I have a very good relationship with, and we still talk. When Long Shot won the Rita, Rita Award, which is an award we might talk about a little bit later, I thanked them. I dedicated the award to them because it felt to me as much like theirs as mine. I could talk about them all night because they're amazing. And the book wouldn't be as authentic for sure if it hadn't been for them. Personally, I've never been in an abusive relationship. So that was a huge part of why Long Shot took me about 2 years to write. When I first started writing it, I think some people may know, and this might dip into some of the questions we have in other places, but when I first had the idea of writing Long Shot after I saw the Ray Rice video, which went viral, and it was a football player who knocked out his then girlfriend, Beyonce, and he dragged her out of the elevator. And everybody was just outraged. And the NFL, when did the NFL know? Why didn't they do more? You know, it was all of this chatter, but it was all around, a lot of it was around his career, his story, you know, what's it mean for him? And, you know, he was not prosecuted. And her story, you know, it felt like we as a culture didn't know how to talk about her in a lot of ways. We didn't know if she was to blame, you know, in the conversations. People were like, is she in it for the money? Why did she stay? And I wanted to explore that. And I wanted to talk about it in a very hopeful way, you know, and the thing I thought about writing it in the context of a romance novel is you are guaranteed a happy ending. And I wanted someone who went through as much as what this character goes through to make, you know, I wanted to guarantee that for her. But when I sat down to write it, I realized I had a lot of my own biases about women who found themselves in this relationship. And how was I supposed to write this character with any level of empathy or understanding if I had biases against her? And so I closed the laptop, and I actually didn't write again on that story for 6 months. And I took the next 6 months just to interview, just to talk to women, to talk to survivors, to do research, until I felt like I had deconstructed my own biases enough to write that story. And so, you know, doing that, part of that was integrating survivors and making sure that I was looking at it completely, you know, from every angle that I could. So
yeah. And domestic violence, the way it's presented so starkly in Longshot, it's not very commonly done in romance. I mean, we've had Maya Rodell last week, and she has a book where on a different type of violence against women, which is rape and sexual assault in the historical period. And again, it is not common because, as you said, that in romance it's all about the HEA, happily ever after, and that's why when you get to the end of Longshot, you go, oh, you take a breath.
There is this there's a word that is kind of like a battle cry for people who have read Longshot, which is hopscotch. You know, if you haven't read Longshot, then you don't understand why a lot of times people will, they'll go hopscotch, they're reading and they'll tweet me or message me and they'll just go hopscotch, and it's kind of like halfway through the book, a little over halfway through the book. And it's kind of like, okay, I can breathe. That's kind of the breathing point in the book. So, yeah.
And you just talked about, how, the process of writing the book and doing the research and talking to survivors and social workers and all. Well, that's really important if anyone's going to tackle this issue in a book. Do you have any other advice to share with authors in romance or any other genres who are thinking of including violence against women in their stories? Anything else you can share about getting it right?
Well, I think, and I don't say I got it right, because who knows? I mean, you work in this area and you say I got it right, so that feels like I got it right. I would never assume that I did. I think definitely integrating people who for whom that's their lived experience. For me, that's pretty basic though. Like when you're writing anything that is beyond what you've experienced, beyond what you've lived, integrating people who have lived that, I think is very crucial. It's so interesting because someone was interviewing me the other day, and it's one of my favorite quotes. I always misquote it, but I'll loosely quote it. Nikki Giovanni says, not that writers aren't to write just what we know, writers write from empathy. And that's what I would say, is make sure that if you are writing about domestic abuse, domestic violence, that you do take time to deconstruct what a lot of culture feeds us about women who are in these situations, because I had my own biases. So deconstructing those so that they don't infect your work. I think also, it sounds crazy. Maybe it doesn't sound crazy. I can't think of the name of it. I wish I could. But Adriana Herrera has a lot of discussion about this and things that I have read, because she's a counselor and she has done several workshops on this at RWA last year, which is Romance Writers of America. She did a workshop on it, and I was somewhere else and I couldn't attend it. But maybe we can put links to some of those. But the thing that I love about her is that she's a romance writer and she's also a professional. And so she's taking both of those pieces and putting them together, and has a whole, really what's emerging to me as a body of work around how we deal with intimate partner violence and domestic abuse in the context of a story that is supposed to be romantic. One thing that I'm very, very clear about is that, because when I first said I was going to write this story, I told my husband first. We were watching the video, and I knew as soon as I saw the video, I knew I was going to write the book. Like, it was instant. First of all, there was just such a sense of indignation that we were watching this. He literally was dragging her out of the elevator like a bag of trash, and he's walking the streets free, and we're all, grappling with it. And I told my husband, I said, I'm going to write a book about this. And he goes, a romance novel? Obviously. And I have to be very clear with people that the abuser in this situation is not the hero. Also, I'm very clear with people that the hero is not, he doesn't heal the heroine. Do you know what I'm saying? I think there's a danger when you write when you write romance with domestic abuse, with violence, with anything like that, to somehow communicate that love, like being in this relationship, and this man is somehow going to heal her, is somehow going to rescue her, is somehow going to fix her. And I'm very, very clear in long shot that August, who is the hero, is not the reason that Iris starts to heal. And part of how I did that, and a lot of readers who are used to reading maybe more conventional romance, which I actually don't write. You know, I didn't realize that at first, because I just like to write what I like to write. And it wasn't until I started getting reviews and comments and pushback from people where they're like, this is not what romance is supposed to be, you know? And I'm like, but there's a couple and they love each other and there's a happily ever after. And they're like, yeah, but there's domestic abuse and there's this or there's whatever. And I do write outside of those lines a lot. So I think people who are used to reading romance, and where the relationship between them is the actual focus, like 80% of what's going on is them together, them kissing, them having sex, them dating, them whatever. My books don't do that as much. I mean, the relationship is always moving forward, but there's a whole year where they are not even together. And it's not like a year on the page. It says like 1 year later. But a lot of romance readers are like, a year? Why? You know, after she leaves the abusive relationship, why can't she just go to August? It's a romance. I was very careful about communicating a woman coming out of a relationship as traumatic as what her relationship was with Caleb, who was her abuser, and immediately going into another relationship without digesting what she had been through, without learning about herself, without deconstructing some of the unhealthy ideas she may have formed about herself, some of the lies that she may have made a part of how she thinks about herself. I wanted to put distance between her leaving that abusive relationship and her starting the relationship with the hero, because one, I didn't want them to think she goes into therapy. I definitely wanted therapy to be a part of this book. She goes into counseling. I didn't want to communicate that he is healing her, that a relationship with him is why she gets quote unquote better. So those are things that I think we have to be careful about as romance authors, is to not glamorize it. And when I say not glamorize it, I don't mean you have to put it on the page the way I did, because there are a lot of romances that address domestic abuse. Often it's in the rearview mirror, like it's something that happened before we start the story with them. That's often the case where they're already in recovery. I think something that is unique is that we encounter the heroine in the midst of it, like it's at the beginning, and then it's the thick of an abusive relationship, and we see it unfolding. And I think there are a lot of things, because we know where this is going, that we have a purview that the heroine doesn't even have. And so we see some of these patterns emerging, maybe even before she recognizes them, and we know where it's going. But one thing so part of my advice, I think, to romance authors is read everything that Adriana Herrera says about writing romance and about intimate partner violence and about domestic abuse. Read as a romance author and as a counselor professional. I think she is uniquely positioned and uniquely informed to help us as authors to make sure that we do not do harm, because that's always, I feel like a doctor, in the sense that, especially with the topics that I write, I feel like my first call is don't do any harm, don't perpetrate stereotypes, because I write very diversely. I write all over the place. My last books featured an Indigenous heroine, which is not something we see in romance very much at all, but that's a big part of my mission as a writer, is to center women of color. And so because I'm another book, the second book in the Hoop series features a Latina, a Mexican-American heroine. And then, of course, book 3 features an African-American heroine. So I write all over the place as far as ethnicity. I've written other abled heroines. So I write all over. And I never want to perpetuate stereotypes. I never want to do harm. So I think that's kind of one of the first things is don't do harm. Make sure that you know what you do. You can never know what you don't know. And that's why integrating people who have lived those experiences is very important. And of course, not to glamorize domestic abuse at all. I don't say to people, if you're going to write about this, write about it the way I did, like put it on the page and, all of that. I understand that this was a unique reading and writing experience. It's so funny because there was a publisher, like I self-published this book, which it really surprised me how much attention it got, how much attention it ended up gaining, because it's like my little book. I'm nobody. You know what I'm saying? I'm not like this big name person or anything like that. I didn't expect a lot to come from the book. It's just, something I did. And I did have a publisher who was interested in publishing the book traditionally. And I'm a hybrid author, meaning I have books that are traditionally published and then I have books that are self-published. And I had a publisher, one of the big publishers who was interested in publishing it. And when I had a conversation with the editor, she wanted me to fade everything to black. And that's a legitimate way to approach it, to refer to things that happen as opposed to showing what happens. That's completely a legitimate way, but that's not the way I wanted to tell the story. And that's, that's up for debate. I definitely get people who ask, do I feel like it went too far, or do I feel like I shouldn't have put it on the page? If I felt like I shouldn't have put it on the page, then I wouldn't have. But I do make sure whenever somebody goes, I'm going to read Longshot, I always lead with, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Make sure you read the content warnings. Make sure you read the reviews. The reviews are there's almost 1,000 reviews, and they're very explicit. A lot of them will explicitly say it was too much this is what happened, this is what happened. I'm glad those reviews are there. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like literally on my content warning, I say read reviews for guidance, because I think that's very helpful for readers as they go into this book.
Yeah, and also especially as 1 in 4 women on average worldwide have encountered some form of domestic violence and abuse in their lives. It's horrendous. 1/4 of women, and we have all the. I just wanted to raise this point. Everyone who's watching, thank you for being with us today. If you want to know about the actual statistics worldwide of women who have encountered domestic violence, marital rape, sexual assault, female genital mutilation, follow us on Twitter. We tweet all of that. Some people have told us our Twitter is eye-opening.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we tweet all of that because until people know how widespread it is.
It's so pervasive. It's so pervasive.
So listen to Kennedy. If you're gonna read Longshot, listen to me as well, because I've been working in this area for over 10 years. If you're gonna read Longshot, go read the reviews first.
Definitely. And for me, there are people who are like, I couldn't get through Longshot. I don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't have a problem with somebody saying, I tried, it wasn't for me. I tried, it was too intense. I'm like, try Blockshot, try Hotshot, try Grip, this is the only book I've written that deals with domestic abuse. And it's also the only book I have that has a trigger warning on it. Although some people might think others should have trigger warnings, but there's no other book that's this intense. But I get a lot more messages. I've stopped counting the emails, the direct messages, the messages on Facebook, the letters that I get. I get letters from women who literally left abusive relationships after they read Longshot. I get messages from women who are now volunteering in shelters after they read Longshot. I get messages from women who have not spoken to their mothers in a decade because they never understood why they stayed. They grew up in an abusive household. They resented their mother, whatever, but that relationship with their mother who was abused was shattered. And after they read Long Shot, they reinitiated contact with their mother. For me, like when people wonder, does it bother me that there are people who are like, Long Shot is too intense? No, because for me, that is the win. I'm not writing for people who say this is too much. I'm writing for people who say, I left my abusive relationship after I read Long Shot. I'm writing for people who say, I'm now volunteering in a shelter. I'm volunteering for people who say, I judged women who were in those relationships. And after I read Long Shot, I don't judge them anymore. I have compassion for them. I understand that there's a patriarchal bias even in our system. The way our legal system is constructed makes it even more difficult, makes it even more dangerous for women to leave. There's so many stories that I encountered as I was interviewing survivors, women who have children with their abusers, and the court system is so concerned about protecting their paternal rights that a man who literally has tried to choke you to death is allowed to see you because you have his children. Some even visiting them in shelters. It's a man who literally, wants to end your life. We're protecting his right. We're jeopardizing your life because we're protecting his right to see his children. So I wanted a big part of Long Shot is really delving into the legal systems and to delving into the systemic biases based on patriarchy, that work against women who want to leave these relationships. And a lot of people say, why don't they just leave? And I'm not telling this to you because this is preaching to the choir, but some people don't realize how when the most jeopardous, I don't even know if that's a real word, but the most dangerous time is when a woman leaves.
The first 6 months. The first 6 months, she is at risk of being killed.
Yes.
In the first 6 months of leaving. And and when we tell people that, they're like, no. And we're like, yes.
Yeah.
But people who have been doing this longer than I have, I have sisters in the movement, right, who have been doing this for 30 years. They know. People have compiled statistics. They've got cases. They got case upon case upon case. But time is marching on. So let's. You mentioned stories. So stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about change, and that you've talked about it, how it affected your readers. How do you think #own voices and women of color romance authors like yourself can address types of violence against women that women and girls in the authors community or culture experience? Because we all know that women of color experience violence, gender-based violence, at a higher rate than white women in many Western countries.
I think it's a lot of what we've already been talking about, is making sure that your research is sound, that you are pulling from the experience of, people who have actually lived this, that you are being honest about what you're finding and finding a way to communicate it with compassion. I think that when I wrote, Iris is a woman of color. That wasn't the focus of the book, but I think it comes out, and Caleb is actually a white male. That wasn't necessarily a focus of the book. A lot of the ethnicity in my book is incidental, but I think the power of seeing her story is a part of that narrative, as far as women of color. And I also, the book that I put out in November and October, it was 2 of them, because we talk about these statistics. You talked about like 1 in 4. When you move to like indigenous communities, it is exponentially higher. When you look at how indigenous women are being affected, even at a greater rate than Black women in this country, indigenous women are encountering violence, intimate partner violence, at a rate that is astounding and horrifying. And even when you look at missing and murdered indigenous women, that was that I really dealt with in my last book, my All the King's Men duet, which of course features, she is not a victim of abuse or anything like that, but she's working on legislation, that agenda as far as making sure that we begin to, because a big part of it is gathering data. A big part of it is the fact that when you're on a reservation, there's a complicated relationship between local, police and local authorities and whatever authorities on that reservation, and people coming onto reservation and not being able to be prosecuted for crimes. Like, it's a very complicated infrastructure. It's a very complicated system that is giving rise to more and more violence against Indigenous women. So for me, that's something that even when I talk about All the King's Men duet, the heroine is not, a survivor. She's not a victim of abuse. But the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and I definitely dissect that there. It's all data driven. That's the other thing, is as you start digging. Maybe it's my background, writing, as a freelance journalist, doing a lot of interviews. I never assume that I already know the story. For me, I feel like I have to find the story. And a lot of times the story is in the data. Like when you're asking about, rates of, if you start digging into the data, the story is there. You see those elevated rates, among women of color. You see the, comparative increases when you start digging into various demographics. The story is there. It's just a matter of telling it in a compelling way, in a compelling, compassionate, authentic, accurate way. Don't stray from the truth. Don't stray from what the data is telling you. Just tell it in a very compelling way. And that's, I guess, what I would say.
Yeah, and we've had Rebecca Roanhorse, who's an award-winning science fiction and fantasy author, and she's an Indigenous female author as well. And we talked about a lot of all of that, and we also interviewed we've interviewed Nita Lucchesi, who is the person who actually gathered all these. She started the Murder and Missing Indigenous Women data. And I'm just gonna, because we're gonna be running out of time soon, I'm just gonna put it out there that anyone who wants to see that interview, which we also shared some slides with the Murder and Missing Women, Indigenous women data on it, our interview with Rebecca Roanhorse, just go on YouTube and type in Rebecca Roanhorse, The Pixel Project, and watch that, because Rebecca talks eloquently about all of that. Now, we're going to be running out of time, so we have one more question before we wrap up, and one more question from us and one more question from the audience. Okay. So the audience question first. Hi, Misty306. Misty is one of our regular viewers. So her question is, since your writings are based on experiences by actual people, do you believe that readers and other people should, and probably I'm going to insert here, would take domestic violence and abuse more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, that's kind of why I wrote the book, is because I feel, you said, since your writings are based on experience by actual people. Yes. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I write a lot of what I write. I think my approach to romance is a little bit different from some of my friends, even who write romance, and it's not an indictment. I think sometimes when we say that's not what I do, or that's not how I approach it, people process it automatically as an indictment, or I should be defensive, or you're saying that I should do it the way you're doing it. And I never say that. Writing art is too personal. And for me, it's too vigorous. It requires too much for me to do it in a way that satisfies someone else and doesn't satisfy me. So I have to be personally satisfied. It has to be personally meaningful for me when I write, because of what it takes to create the stories that I write. I love Ava DuVernay. She's like one of my favorite people. I pretty much worship her. But I heard a quote from her, which I will butcher, but she basically talked about art and getting to the core of this question. She talked about art and activism. And she said that art, and basically she's talking about using storytelling as activism, which is kind of a huge part of my brand. My brand weaves storytelling, fiction with activism. I write about I mean, my stories, you've read Long Shot, so you know, yes, it's about domestic abuse, but it also is pretty steamy, and I've written about police brutality. I've written about, mass incarceration. I've written about, missing and murdered Indigenous women. I write about these things, but then there's also all this steam, and it's hot, and there's romance, and there's dating, and, there's a happily ever after. So that's really a part of my brand, is taking fiction and, really steamy fiction and activism and marrying those two things. And what Ava said, I'm not going to try to quote her directly, but this is, loosely quoting. She basically said that art and activism have the same root because they both imagine what's possible. Art is us basically yielding to our imagination, letting our imagination go where it's going to go and seeing what's possible. So is activism. Activism is looking at a current reality and saying it should not be this way. And I'm going to do something so that it doesn't stay this way. And that's also those two things. I understand so well what she's saying, because she's saying both of these are acts of imagination. And I think that's what I do. When I interview real people, when I pull from real stories, it's because I want people to take it seriously. Like with that question, I'm writing this story because I want to see an impact. I don't generally write stories other than because I want to see an impact. It has to be meaningful to me. And I don't want it to be like after school special, soapbox, PSA. That's not how I want it to feel, like major messaging. But for me, generally speaking, I don't write escapism romance. I don't generally write those books where you just get lost and you're like, ooh, the real world just fades away. Because for me, the real world is the point. And I like to show real people in real situations have happily ever afters. You know what I mean? And so because that's the kind of thing I like to write, you're guaranteed a happily ever after, but the road to that might be difficult. And that could be because of my own experience with love. I have to fight for my love. I have to fight for my relationship to keep it healthy. And in some ways, to fight outside pressures that would come and wreck a relationship, or that would come and make life hard. Life is hard sometimes. And I don't write books that don't talk about how life is hard. I write books that talk about how life is hard, but there is a happily ever after. So I hope I answered the question.
Okay, so producers are going, it's coming up to the end. So very quickly, the last question before we tell everyone where to go and get your goodies. This is a Captain Obvious question, but we've asked all 130 plus of the authors whom we've interviewed. You have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against work as a whole. Why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Why do I support the cause to end violence against women? Oh, I mean, obviously because it's so incredibly important. I mean, it's something that it's critical in culture. It's critical in our society. You read the statistics. It's not something, so many women are being affected by it. It's your neighbor. Even if you don't see it, it's your neighbor, it's someone in your family, it's a teacher, it could be your kid's teacher. There's no way that you are going through your life, and even if you don't know it, encountering someone who has been touched by abuse. Statistically, there's no way. Do you know what I mean? And so if so many women are experiencing that, then it's something that we have to bring to the forefront. For me, I leverage my platform, which is not huge, but I want my readers to know the truth. And there's a part in Long Shot where there are these, Iris is a unique perspective that Iris is overhearing other people talk about someone who's in an abusive relationship. They don't know that she is being abused. That's happening. We are having conversations about people who are in abusive relationships, not knowing there are people all around us that are in those situations. And it's kind of a unique perspective because we're hearing the judgment from the person who's being judged, and they don't know that it's her. So that's why I've done it. And that's why I continue to look for opportunities to support and to articulate these issues for people who may not have the full picture.
That is awesome. People need to know this, you know. Okay, so I'm gonna put myself back on screen.
Okay.
So you can't enter interview. Hi everybody. If you haven't, you know, I'm the disembodied voice at the other end of the screen, talking to Iris and reading out your questions to her. We have run out of time, but before we go, we are going to talk about Kennedy's wonderful, absolutely awesome, super duper long shot goodie bundle that is over at Rally Up, which is our Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. And there is one signed and personalized special edition, a paperback edition of Longshot that's unavailable anywhere else. And one Kennedy Ryan water bottle to keep you hydrated in these times when we're all shut in. So, you know, during this pandemic, one book bowl to keep your books safe, and the Kingmaker, one card that has the Kingmaker art on it, one Kennedy Ryan pen and notebook so you can write down all your thoughts, and one Kennedy Ryan makeup bag for you to stash your favorite makeup on the go. Now, I'm going to share a little slide that shows you all where to go to get this. So here we go. So you can go get it. You can donate to get it at bit.ly/R4P Rally Up IWD 2020. This is case sensitive, so please take it down exactly. And also the producers in the chat box will be sharing the link with you. I see that Xiaoxin has shared it with you. And you can find out more about Read for Pixels by going to bit.ly/Read for Pixels. Now that we have raised $5,930 so far. So we shot past our initial $5,000 goal. And we are now aiming for our $10,000 stretch goal by April 15th. So we can keep all our programs, including this one, up and running. So please give generously. All funds go towards our work to help end violence against women. We are 501c3. So if you're in the US, you will very likely be able to get this as a tax deduction, but check with your tax expert in your state. And also there are plenty more author goodies available from authors including Tamora Pierce, Anna Stevens, Kendara Blake, Leanna Renee Heiber, Maya Rodell, whom we mentioned just now, who also writes very powerful romance books, and Kat Howard, PC Cast, and more. And if you want to find out more about stopping violence against women, you can go to our website at www.thepixelproject.net. Now, before we go, Kennedy, do you have any announcements you want to make?
Not any major announcements. I mean, I have a book that's coming out May 26th, and I'm really, really excited about it. For anybody who read in, which we were talking about earlier, the heroine was an Indigenous woman. Amazing. I have a book coming out May 26th called Queen Move, and I'm very, very excited about it. So that's it. That's what I'm working on.
So again, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you everybody for being with us today and listening to us talk about Longshot and domestic abuse and fiction and romance and all that good stuff. This will be, if you have friends who could not make it today, who cannot make it today, this is recorded on the actual page that you're watching this on, so you can send a link to them, share it. Let's spread the word about Longshot, about domestic violence, and about stopping violence against women. So everybody, thank you so much, and have a great day or good night wherever you are in the world, and stay safe this weekend.
Thank you for having me.